Welcome to the second episode of The Emerging Artist. I am so happy you're here today, and just for a moment I want to celebrate being here for episode 2 because we were just talking about getting started in the previous episode, and I'm just happy to be here today and doing this. Thank you for all the love and support you've shown me in the first episode. I loved reading your feedback, your comments, your messages about this, and your reflections too. I hope that this podcast is serving like a channel for exchange, communication, and sharing, because we all go through pretty similar things, especially on this journey. So let's get into the second episode. And today I want to bring to you a topic that's really been bothering me for years. You're gonna know in a second what I mean. So today we'll be discussing artistic identity and how that relates to a job title or not. First of all, I wanted to start by acknowledging that artists and creative people get inspiration from many things, many fields, many other artists, so it's kind of difficult to confine ourselves into one title or one word even. So I'm just starting by saying this so that it's out there. Now, having said that, it's really difficult to communicate the range of the things that we do to people who are maybe outside of the industry or that need a little bit more context about our work and the mediums that we use. I want to pause here for a moment and ask you, how do you introduce yourself? And this has been my question for as long as I can remember. As soon as I picked up more than one artistic medium or more than one way of expressing myself in this sense, I had real trouble shaking hands with people in events or like just getting to know people who I know, and myself included, maybe you as well. We really dread one simple question people ask at networking events or maybe at friends' drinks when they want to get to know you. They ask, what do you do? And if you're like me, you would kind of be taken aback by this question and not quite know how to answer unless you've prepared for this. You know your pitch really well and you know who you're talking to. Because this very simple question, when it comes to artists, we have a tendency to go from a simple word or title to a deep existential crisis about our identity, our function in society, the value of our art, and in general, like how we exist in this world. So I'm hoping that today's episode will offer you a little bit of insight into how I'm thinking about this, and I hope that this does help with how you think about your artistic identity and the things that you do, how you frame your practice, and how you give context to your work and yourself as an artist. I think it's fair to start by mentioning a little bit of my own background and story for those of you who don't know me. So I've always been involved with dance and music, and from a very young age I've been exposed to very artistic activities and involved in all kinds of like plays and dances and bands and stuff like that. I did study architecture. I enjoyed that. It was something really creative, but there was also something missing, which was movement and creation and more artistic freedom. So moving to the UK from Greece, I studied choreography. I got an MFA, which is kind of like a research heavy degree, which I also really enjoyed. And we're going to be talking about academia in episodes further down the line. But that's to say, I moved from architecture back to dance, choreography. I still am involved with music. So I found extremely difficult to introduce myself and my practice to people over the years, and that has changed as I change, as my interests kind of evolve, as my practice evolves. So I have always asked myself, what am I? Do I shake my hands and be like, I'm an architect, but I'm also a dancer and performer and choreographer. I am a singer, but I also choreograph, and all these things became little voices in my head. And every time I had an interaction, I had almost like a panic attack, because I felt that, well, if I don't know how I can introduce myself to someone, how would they perceive the value of what I do? Would they feel insecure about the quality of my work? Would they feel that I haven't given this enough thought? I haven't prepared myself for this interaction? I'm not someone who has a very solid practice or understanding of my practice. So all these questions and thoughts in my head were really, really blocking me from having a true exchange, a real conversation, because I thought I had to justify myself, I had to justify my choices and my career path. The next challenge is that, and what I understood along the way, was that a creative career is a non-linear one. And I'm not saying that everyone's path is obviously different, and people who do work in the corporate world, they don't have a completely straight and linear path. But I think, especially in the creative world, because the stimuli is so much, and there's openness, and there's possibility, and there's, you adapt, you change, you evolve. There's so much more opportunity to move sideways and to jump from one place to the other, and to work with different people, different institutions, different venues, organizations, and all that stuff. So I found it extremely difficult to understand this and to know that there's another way of having a career, rather than going from, a very, very steady growth in terms of position, in terms of seniority. In other words, I think I was trying to recreate kind of like the corporate ladder, or what I understood was a career at the time in the creative world. So obviously, when this was not possible, or this didn't happen for me, I was really frustrated, and I couldn't get what is wrong. I was very fortunate that I listened to a lot of people who had more experience talking about this very thing. And, by finding allies, as I said in the first episode, I was really able to zoom out, look at my overall career trajectory, and understand, instead of like what positions and what institutions I'm going for, I was able to understand the connections between them, the threads. So jumping from architecture to choreography, for example, it might have seemed a little bit of a change of fields, but for me and the way I perceived architecture and choreography, they have so many similarities. And this is also going to be in some of the next episodes, because the connecting threads between architecture and choreography, the way both fields understand the body and its interaction with the environment, with time, with sounds, with other bodies in space, I think they're very, very similar, and they have so many things to learn from each other. And architectural thinking is very much complementary to choreographic thinking. So in a way, I found a way to connect those practices and to be inspired by both ways of thinking, both methodologies and both approaches. So in the end, having that understanding made me more confident in my own practice, and it gave me permission to introduce myself in whichever way I felt is more true to my practice and to my artistic identity. And also it allowed me to form an artistic identity, because for the first 10 years of being a freelance artist, I don't think I knew what I was doing. I was just drawn to things, and the fact that I didn't have to justify why I'm drawn to these things was very, very liberating. And sometimes I couldn't achieve this level of freedom and joy, but other times I was able to just be completely immersed in what I was doing without having the need or the pressure to understand it or to frame it for someone else. I also wanted to talk about the value of having a multidisciplinary practice, and this term is truly one of my favorites. I learned it here in the UK actually, because coming from Greece, as I said, I wanted to find a way to kind of justify why I'm moving from architecture to choreography to be in the dance industry in a more active way. So I discovered that in London, where I studied, people really valued that multidisciplinary background. And when I heard that word, I was like, that really, really encapsulates my experience. And I also found out that many, many other people, in fact, most artists have a multidisciplinary practice. And I must say, it's a constant form of inspiration. It's such a beautiful way to be drawn to different things and to meet different people. They broaden your creative practice so much. You expand as an artist, you get influenced by so many things, and you give back to them. So I really love calling myself a multidisciplinary artist, and I think it's a strength rather than a disadvantage to have a practice that is so expanded. Hand in hand with this realization came to me when I was thinking about comparing an artistic career to maybe like an office job career or like a 9-to-5 career. And I was thinking that there's something really extraordinary about specializing in one thing and being really, really good at it. But I think if your brain and your body and your soul cannot be confined into one practice, one medium, one field of interest, there's value in that, and it's so interesting. And if specializing doesn't work for you, I don't think it should be a thing for you, I don't think it should be a goal. That's to say that I really admire people who have a specialty and they put all their effort and their love into this. But I have effort and love to put into many places, and that's okay. And I also feel that it'll be honest to say that this realization took a long time, a lot of years. So what do you do if you want to introduce yourself, if you are practicing how to present yourself and your work to other people, and you don't feel ready to use one word or one title to do so? And I think the problem starts from us wanting to be professionals and to have something on the business card. I remember actually that this was the number one thing that really annoyed me. I was making my business cards, and every time I had to, have a really, really long thinking process about what do I put under my name. And sometimes I've tried slashes and I've done 3 words. I usually do architect, choreographer, performer with slashes. And other times I'm like, I just need one word. I don't want to use all these terms. Other times I've used interdisciplinary artist or just artist, and I'm like, what if people think that I'm a fine artist? And it just gets so complicated and frustrating and tiring, you know? So I do feel for you if you have a similar challenge in the way that you want to present yourselves. And I've tried to work this out, and I've discussed this with many people, especially people who have a similar approach to this and they have a similar way of working with different materials and different mediums. So through these conversations and through my own experiences in the field, I'm offering some thoughts which I hope that they're useful for you. You find them helpful in a way. So instead of thinking what word describes me, describes what I do, try to think about what interests you. Try to think about what things you find inspiring, what things you're drawn to. And even if it's an environment, even if it's a way of working, even if it's more than medium and tools, maybe it's methodology, maybe it's an umbrella of things, just make a note of that and become aware of that, of the different things that exist in your artistic practice or world or mind map of interests. The second thought is it's really helpful sometimes to look at other people's work, other artists that inspire you, and see how they describe what they do, how they communicate their work and their methodology and their practice to other people. So if you find that there are some companies or some artists that have a multidisciplinary practice, or they use similar mediums, or they have similar interests to you, look at their websites, look at their bios, their profiles, their maybe a press release that they've done, and try to find language that resonates with you. So language is really important, and it's much more than words. It's meaning, it's communicating the essence of what we do, and it's really important as artists to get this right. Although I do recognize it's a skill, and for people whose English is not the first language as myself, it's even more of a challenge. But try to approach this as another part of your practice, of your creative process. So yeah, really look at people who have similar practices and understand the language they use. The other thing which I found helpful is literally thinking of fields of practice and art forms as pillars of my work. So in my previous example for my own story, I have architecture, I have choreography, I have performance, and I have music. So I mix as bubbles, and I try to find connections and threads between them to understand how they coexist in my practice and to understand what things I'm taking from one practice into the other and how I merge them together, because the way you use them together is informing and forming your own practice, your very, very unique way of doing things and making things. So if you are a visual person, I encourage you to do this on a piece of paper, or maybe even like a massive mind map. So literally draw circles and put however many mediums or fields of interest you have, and try to find connections, similarities, and even differences to see what gaps are you filling from one to the other. And having said that, with the connections, the connecting threads between the practices, maybe you begin to understand that there's something above that. So there's an umbrella of things under which these practices exist. And I'm going to use my own example again, because I think it's helpful to kind of picture what I'm trying to communicate with you. So in the field of architecture and dance and choreography, I understood that body, time, and space are shared elements of these. So a step above that would be to have a bubble with body, space, and time and see what other elements exist in there that are of interest to me. And, so this quickly became experiences. I want to create experiences for bodies in space and time. So by doing this process with the bubbles and then the umbrella of things and then understanding the foundation of these two practices, it helped me frame my practice in a way that's very true to myself and to my unique approach into making work and sharing work. And a really, really helpful tip or trick, if you wish, when you are talking to people, this is something that really unlocked my communication skills and really gave me permission to think about my own practice and how I communicated with different people, because I felt that it's not a rigid thing. It's not a put on a business card title type of things. Artistic practice is always evolving. As much as you evolve as a person and as an artist, as much as you get inspired by different things that exist around you and also evolve, the practice is going to evolve with you. So this title or this word or however you wish to describe your practice will also change. And that's inevitable. And that's also beautiful because it shows growth and change. So let's pick up a real world scenario. Let's say you go to a networking event about architects. And like in my case, you are trained as an architect, but you work in the live performance and immersive performances kind of field. So instead of having a really solid idea about your own title, I want you to think about the purpose of you communicating with somebody else what you do. So in this context, I would maybe want to have interesting conversation with architects and the way they perceive space, the way they perceive bodies interacting with space, the way the space inspires us as bodies and influences our movement. So I would approach this with saying my background in architecture and also transitioning into the field of choreography and dance, but always having that big umbrella that we talked about before. So body, space, and time framework to communicate to them what I do and how we use a similar way of talking about things. What I'm offering to you is the idea of giving context to people who you're trying to communicate your practice with. For example, in the context of an event for architects, if I just turn up and introduce myself as a performer, which I am, I don't think it would give context to them about my background and the way I think about things. But there's still a way to infuse your multidisciplinary practice into these conversations by taking them on your journey, by saying that this is my starting point, this is how I think about things, and also this is the mediums which I choose to express myself with or through. So I think that was something really, really helpful for me, and it gave me permission, as I said before, to not have to justify my choices and my practice. So with every interaction, have a think about the environment, the purpose, the context, and have a little bit of preparation of how you're going to introduce yourself. Not necessarily to practice the lines, but to feel the confidence that you have a complete understanding of your work and practice and your goal with this interaction. It's really useful. It helps people understand you. It really helps people with looking through your lens in a conversation or interaction. I hope that tip was useful, and let me know in the comments or send me your messages. I always read them, and I hope that this helps, and I hope that this gives you a bit of a push when it comes to framing your artistic practice for other people. I think it's also very valuable and helpful to articulate the different things that we do for different people. It makes us really crystallize some things about our practice that maybe are not so well articulated in our head. So to be able to verbalize them and communicate with someone else is really, really valuable process and experience. In this episode, we've talked about artistic identity and how to go beyond a job title. And I really hope that you now have the tools and the tips and the tricks to approach this maybe in a different way, maybe in a more helpful way for you and your practice. So before we go, I wanted to give you maybe something to think about or something to work on. So first of all, make your big map, either in your head, on a sketchbook, or really up on the wall to see. So make your bubbles, create your fields of interest, and try to find keywords or connecting threads between them. This is a beautiful way of putting what's in your head out there for you to see. Another thing you can do is ask your friends and your collaborators and people who are kind of familiar with your work, maybe as audiences even, ask them to describe your work and practice to you without you kind of leading on to that and giving them context or ideas of how to. Just let them freely describe in their own words what they think you're doing or what they think you're trying to achieve. It's a really refreshing way. It might be a little bit scary because it's out of your control, I understand, but really allow them to use their own words. And even if they're not trained, I think that's even better because they have such a fresh perspective of speaking about work and using words that maybe are not very similar to other things. So I would encourage you to either have conversations or have them give back to you a short paragraph or maybe some words, some keywords about you, your work, and your practice. That's really helpful, and I think it will allow you to see things differently, because oftentimes we get stuck. We're too much in our own heads and we can't zoom out to see things from a bird's eye view. Another thing, which is a big thing for me, and over the years it has become a leading force in the things, in the way I do things, and it's to pick intuitively. Whatever resonates with you, really tuning to that part of the body that echoes, what feels right, and don't have the this idea that you need to overly justify everything because otherwise you're exposed. There's so much value in listening to our intuition and to have this be the reason why we do things. Let's not overly explain things through the intellect. Let's not always have to use big words or big sentences and really complicated ways of communicating. Let's just pick intuitively whatever feels right for you is the right thing. And then the last thing that I sometimes do because I think it's fun, and that's not to sound very, intellectual and elitist, but sometimes I would make up words that I feel describe my practice best. And it is part of trial and error, isn't it? I don't have a very kind of rigid idea of what I should identify as an artist, but sometimes, for example, I've used the term experience creator, and that's so beautiful because it means nothing and it kind of means something at the same time. Like, when you hear experience creator, what do you think I mean? Write me in the comments, because I think that gives you a little bit of a vibe. It gives you a little bit of the environment that I'm trying to create. And that's enough information when it comes to I'm giving you an idea of what I do. I'm giving you a sensation or a mood or an atmosphere of what I do. I don't necessarily every time need to explain and describe what I do, but if I give the vibe, then for me, it's enough of a communication. It's enough of an exchange for that. So, in a more traditional context, or in maybe people who are outside the industry, and I feel that they would get my background easier if I say I'm a choreographer and I work with performance art and contemporary movement, that's fine. But if I'm with an audience that is really into immersive experiences and more participatory performances and things like that, maybe I would use the term experience creator because it's a conversation starter. And sometimes I have a sense of I want to discuss this with people and I want to hear what they think and I want to kind of listen to their own reflections of what an experience creator is and what kind of experiences, As I said, it's a conversation starter. You drop that term and people go, what kind of experiences, and then you roll. So, as I said before, the purpose of every interaction and communication is important. So, if my goal is to start a discussion that is going to inspire me as well as give some people context of what I do, I would use that term, or I would make up something different that is still very true to my concept and my own practice, because I have done my work and I've done my fields of interest and the connections. So I would pick some threads of that and share them with people and see what comes up. I hope these tips were helpful for you. I hope they offer you some new ways of thinking about your practice and thinking about your artistic identity and how you introduce yourself and how you articulate your own work. I will see you in episode 3. Be well.